Let me start by showing you a really interesting website, live. Okay. Damn, advertising again. Can someone please fix that somehow? Some of the technicians here, please. And while I get them to fix this, let me ask you a question. Who of you here uses an ad blocker? Please, a show of hands for who uses an ad blocker. Wow. Wow, this is more than half of you have put up the hands, which is, it's a lot, but it's actually not uncommon for a very well-educated audience. In a normal population, it's about 25%. It's still a big number. Think about this. 25% of the entire population have actively downloaded an ad blocker, a little tool, to save themselves of blinking banners, YouTube video ads, or things like that, so really bad pop-ups. But actually, the true number of ad blocking users is actually 100%, because thanks to those 25% of the population, or the 50% of the population here in the room, who decided to somehow vaccinate themselves by using an ad blocker, the industry has been forced to rethink and to change. As a result, actually today, almost all browsers, so including Chrome, Firefox, Opera, have put some form of ad blocking into the browser. So all of you are actually using an ad blocker, many of you without knowing. So hundreds of millions of consumers who have actively blocked ads have made the advertising industry sit up and listen and almost eradicated bad ads, just like vaccinations have eradicated many diseases. So in the past 2 years, the ad industry and the ad tech vendors and ad agencies have slowly begun to enforce minimum standards to online ads, and online ads are becoming much more respectful to the user. Cases like this are fortunately more and more rare. But how did we get there? So let me tell you a story, my personal story, on how I went from someone selling ads, not as bad as this one here though, to starting a company that forced the ad industry to change its practices by making ad blocking popular around the world. Well, when I first found out about ad blocking, back in 2009, I was actually on the other side. I ran a company called Cedo, also locally here in Cologne, which I had founded back in 2001, and which ironically was making money from online advertising. That's when I met Vladimir, the original founder of an ad blocker, of our ad blocker called AdBlock Plus. Many years before him and I met in 2009, he had started to build an ad blocker first for himself and then for an ever-growing online open source community. We soon discovered that we shared the same passion for the topic. He came from an open source security background, and it's worth mentioning, by the way, that online ads carry a big security risk as well. So they can act as a transporter for malware, which then can infect your computer just like a virus. And I came from the other side, so the dark side of online advertising, maybe the reason why I now have the passion of the convert for this topic. On this ground, together with Till Fida, our third co-founder, we decided to form a small company as the driving force behind our ad blocker. We named the company IO. We settled in a co-working space right here in Cologne-Ehrenfeld. Back then, AdBlock Plus already had a few million users, but it was only available for the Firefox browser. We knew that in order to bring it to more people, we had to bring it to more platforms, to all the other browsers, and also on mobile phones. And that was what we worked on in the beginning of the years of our company. And it worked. As Ted's motto states, a good idea is worth spreading. And the idea that you can enjoy the internet without ads is obviously a very, very good idea. So AdBlock Plus spread to mainstream adoption. Within only a few years, we went to over 100 million active users from all over the world, pretty much unheard of for a German internet startup. By now, you might actually wonder what our business model is. So let me explain it. It's actually quite simple. Our philosophy is that not all online ads are bad. And also our philosophy is that websites need to make money too, since all of us enjoy free content and free services which the internet offers, which would be hard without any ads. So we combined this philosophy with a business model and coined a concept called acceptable ads. So the idea of acceptable ads is that unobtrusive, non-annoying ads are ads which should actually be shown and should be allowed while we rigorously block all the bad ads. And this certification of good ads then became our main business model, and it also put pressure on websites, advertisers, and agencies around the world to improve their advertising. We came with very good intentions, but we were also utterly naive. Because no matter how messed up an industry is, existing players will always fight back. It happens every time a new player comes in every industry. And to be fair, there are bigger messes than the online advertising world. Just think of the fossil fuel industry, or the tobacco industry, or the weapons industry. They're obviously bad, but they also fight back. Gandhi famously said, "First they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win." We were pretty much ignored and sometimes laughed at until 2013. And that's when the fight started. First came massive press against us. Our problem was that many of the same companies for whom we are a threat, so publishers, newspapers, and other content websites, are also the ones who write about us. I used to think that there is editorial freedom and that editors always work completely independent of the commercial side of the papers. Not anymore. There was a flurry of bad press and even some very extreme cases. For example, one of the biggest German tech publications once ran a multi-page article about us claiming that Adblock Plus is a potential spyware. Fake news at its best. Another lie that some outlets repeated over and over again is that advertisers can just buy their way on the acceptable ads list. Truth is that the standards are defined by a non-profit organization and that the companies who want to be on the list have to adhere to the very same standards. You simply cannot buy your way onto the list. Fortunately, we had a PR agency in the United States that was able to turn this negative attention into positive consumer momentum and hundreds of millions of downloads for Adblock Plus. Secondly, starting in 2013, we were hit by over 12 lawsuits. Think about this, 12 lawsuits. The biggest German publishers, as we later learned, back in 2013, literally sat together in one room and said, "Hey, let's all sue this German startup here in Cologne at the same time, and then they're going to be toast." We were only 10 people back then, so their tactic almost worked, but only almost. We battled up to the highest court in Germany, the Supreme Court in Karlsruhe, of which I put a picture here because I like it so much. And by the way, we were dragged to the Supreme Court not just once, but twice. But once publishers saw that the courts sided with us, they tried antitrust proceedings. We had to battle 2 antitrust proceedings, which is kind of unheard for a German startup with only so few employees. And once even that didn't work, one big corporation, a large German publisher, I'll spare you the name, who was particularly angry at us, turned to the most aggressive tactic I've ever seen in my entire life. They managed to send us a police raid into our office. Imagine that. We were peacefully sitting in our Ehrenfeld office here one morning in early 2007, doing our usual work, when 20 policemen stormed the office. To accomplish this in our fairly solid legal system, I guess this corporation had to twist many, many arms and many, many facts. But anyway, the case was, of course, later dismissed, but still, of course, we remember the story forever. Thirdly, we were fought technically. A cat and mouse game started. Websites tried to place ads that we would not recognize as ads. We improved the ad blocker, and the game started again. At its height, there were over 30 startups in the entire world offering those kind of circumvention services, what they were called, circumventing the ad blocker. Or in other words, serving ads to users who had explicitly said no to advertising. Or in less polite words, spam. And you might be thinking only small, obscure sites tried this. No, actually, our biggest enemy was a small and obscure site called Facebook. I still vividly remember one day in August 2016 when the Wall Street Journal reported in a scoop that on the next day, Facebook will force advertising on ad blocking users. This indeed then happened. Our users were furious. We got thousands of emails and, a little ironically, messages over Facebook. One day later, we had fixed the loophole Facebook had found and blocked ads again. But obviously, Facebook's engineers are smart too. They found another loophole. The cat and mouse game continued for a full 2 years. Sometimes we had the upper hand, sometimes they did. At some point, Facebook pretty much gave up. We still got something out of it, namely this epic photo, where the biggest advertising newspaper in the United States imagined visually our fight with Facebook. It now hangs in our office, nicely framed. And last but not least, number 4, the most interesting of all strategies used against us. Others started copying our idea. In our case, the world's largest advertisers and web companies, including Google, Facebook, and Microsoft, came together to define a standard for acceptable advertising themselves. They called it better ads. And the standard was, surprise, surprise, much weaker. But it was a step into the right direction. So it prohibited still certain forms of bad advertising, and so it definitely was something which was generally good for the industry. And even more, it was enforced directly within the products of those giants. So that's why everybody on the planet who's using the internet, so billions of people were at the end indirectly influenced by our original idea. A very satisfying thing, which of course I can't help but be a little proud of, but also the most threatening for us as a company in the long run, trying to put us back into irrelevance and trying to calm the users with an inferior standard. You see the same in other industries. Think, for example, about organic food, which people literally ridiculed even as recent as 20 years ago. Organic food was, and still is, heavily lobbied against by the powerful agriculture lobby. But once most people realized that the idea is really superior, consumers adopted it. Its share grows every year. And we have to thank the people who fought for organic food early on that we can now enjoy it and find plenty in every supermarket. In a similar fashion, it's kind of our fault that some forms of ads like pop-ups or big page takeovers, like the one you saw earlier, are extinct. As extinct as smallpox and cholera. And not only the half of you in the room who vaccinated themselves have been saved, but also the other half. Of course, there is still a lot of work to do. The internet is still full of annoying ads, but we are on the right track. Not long ago, Edward Snowden, one of our idols, said a sentence we obviously loved. He said, "Using an ad blocker is not just a right, but a duty. Just as it is your duty to society to vaccinate yourself and to not come to work with a fever, it still makes a lot of sense to install an ad blocker of a higher standard to protect yourself, but also to force and push this multi-billion-dollar industry to even more change for the better. Change that is continued to be needed." What the experience taught me, and what it can teach you, is that an idea worth sharing is a powerful thing. Know that your idea, no matter how small at first, can grow in influence way beyond your initial audience. So make sure that your idea is worth copying. Think about how your idea can build momentum and to become a force for good like a vaccine. Because if an idea is successful, others will adopt it and possibly change the world. Thank you.